Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, I have a story that will leave you speechless. What started as a simple afternoon at McDonald's quickly spiraled into an intense confrontation, a shocking robbery, and an unexpected act of leadership that no one saw coming. It was just another ordinary day, customers enjoying their meals, the usual chatter filling the air, until tension erupted between two women, bringing the entire restaurant to a standstill. Just when things couldn't get any more dramatic, an unexpected figure walked in and changed everything. And trust me, you won't believe how it all ended. Stay till the end, because this story takes some unbelievable twists. It was an ordinary afternoon inside a bustling McDonald's. The scent of crispy fries and fresh burgers filled the air as families, friends, and solo diners enjoyed their meals. The soft hum of conversation mixed with the occasional beeping of the fryers and the chatter of children. Everything seemed normal, until a sharp voice cut through the atmosphere, bringing the restaurant to an eerie standstill. At the center of the commotion stood Clara, a woman with sharp features and an even sharper tongue. Her piercing voice carried across the room as she locked eyes with Naomi, a strong-willed woman who refused to be intimidated. The tension between them was thick, drawing the attention of everyone around. Some turned away, not wanting to get involved, while others discreetly pulled out their phones to record the confrontation. Behind the counter, Jake, the young manager, watched nervously. His hands fidgeted, and his mind raced as he debated whether to step in. He had handled customer complaints before, but this was something different, something bigger. As the argument escalated, the entire restaurant held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The air inside the McDonald's suddenly turned heavy as Clara's voice rang out, sharp and filled with disdain. "Why don't you go back to where you came from?" she sneered, her words laced with hostility. A hush fell over the restaurant. Conversation stopped, fries were left half-eaten, and all eyes turned toward the brewing confrontation. Some customers exchanged uneasy glances, while others instinctively reached for their phones, sensing that this moment was about to escalate. Naomi, standing tall, refused to back down. Her expression remained firm as she met Clara's glare head-on. "Excuse me? I was born here, just like you," she said, her voice steady and unwavering. The words hung in the air, a clear challenge to the insult thrown at her. A ripple of tension spread through the room. Some people shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure whether to intervene, while others watched in silent anticipation. The atmosphere crackled with energy. The employees behind the counter exchanged nervous glances, uncertain of what to do. Jake, the young manager, swallowed hard, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He knew he should step in, but the weight of the moment held him frozen. The restaurant, just moments ago filled with casual chatter and the smell of burgers, had transformed into a scene of confrontation, one that no one could ignore. Just as the tension in the room reached its peak, the soft jingle of the entrance bell cut through the heavy silence. Heads turned as a familiar figure walked in. Donald Trump. His presence alone sent a ripple through the crowd, whispers spreading like wildfire. He scanned the room, quickly taking in the scene, the frozen customers, the nervous employees, and most of all, the heated standoff between Clara and Naomi. Without hesitation, Trump stepped forward, his commanding presence shifting the energy in the room. "Excuse me, ladies," he said, his voice steady but firm. "What seems to be the problem here?" The room held its breath as Clara, still fuming, turned toward him. For a brief moment, she seemed flustered, but her anger hadn't completely faded. "Mr. Trump, this person was being disrespectful," she said, gesturing toward Naomi. Naomi didn't waver. "I was standing up for myself. She made a racist comment, and I won't tolerate it." Her voice was calm but resolute. Trump nodded thoughtfully, his gaze shifting between the two women. Then with conviction he spoke. Racism has no place in America. We respect one another. His words carried weight, settling over the room like a gavel striking a courtroom bench. The tension that had gripped the restaurant seemed to loosen, if only slightly. Clara's face turned pale, embarrassment creeping in as the reality of the moment sank in. She opened her mouth as if to argue, but Trump simply raised a hand. Enough, he said firmly. You owe this young lady an apology. A heavy silence followed. For a moment, it seemed Clara might resist. But under the weight of Trump's stare and the expectant gazes of the surrounding customers, her shoulders slumped. I'm sorry, she mumbled, barely above a whisper. Naomi gave a small nod. Thank you, she said simply. The tension in the room eased, but the moment wasn't over yet. No one could have predicted what was about to happen next. Just as the tension in the room began to ease, the front door swung open with force, slamming against the wall. A man in a dark hoodie rushed in, his movements quick and agitated. The atmosphere shifted instantly. What had been a tense but controlled confrontation now turned into something far more dangerous. Before anyone could react, the man pulled out a weapon, his shaky hands gripping it tightly. Everyone stay where you are, he shouted, his voice filled with desperation. Gasps filled the air as customers ducked under tables, shielding their loved ones. Clara let out a sharp cry and cowered in her seat, while Naomi instinctively pulled a young boy close, protecting him from harm. The man's eyes darted wildly around the room before settling on the counter. He pointed the weapon at Jake, the young manager, whose face had turned ghostly pale. Open the register. Now, the man ordered, his voice laced with urgency. Jake's hands trembled as he fumbled with the buttons, struggling to keep himself together. Through the chaos, one figure remained still. Donald Trump, seated near the window, hadn't moved an inch. His expression was calm, his eyes fixed on the desperate young man. Then, in a voice that cut through the fear, he spoke. Hey, kid, Trump said, leaning back slightly in his seat. What's your name? The man flinched, startled by the unexpected question. What? He snapped, gripping the weapon tighter. Trump didn't waver. I've been around long enough to know that people don't do things like this unless they're out of options, he said, his voice steady. So tell me, what's going on? What do you need? The room remained frozen. The customers, the employees, even Jake, all held their breath as the man hesitated, his grip faltering slightly. For the first time since he had stormed in, something in his eyes shifted. A flicker of doubt, a moment of hesitation, and just like that, the balance of power in the room began to change. The restaurant remained frozen as Trump leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. What's your name, son? The man's breathing was heavy, his fingers still gripping the weapon tightly. His eyes darted around the room, filled with fear and uncertainty. For a moment, it seemed like he wouldn't answer. But then, with a shaky voice, he mumbled, Eric? Trump nodded, his expression unreadable. All right, Eric. Listen, I can tell you're not a bad kid. You don't want to be here doing this. Eric's hands trembled. His tough exterior was starting to crack. He swallowed hard before finally admitting, I don't have a choice. My mom, she's in the hospital. We can't afford her treatment. I don't know what else to do. His voice broke, and for the first time the room saw him not as a criminal, but as a desperate son trying to save his mother. Trump nodded again, this time with understanding. I get it. You're scared. You feel like this is your only way out, he said. But this isn't the answer, Eric. This is only going to make things worse for you and for her. Eric's grip on the weapon faltered. Tears welled up in his eyes as he looked around, seeing the fear and judgment on the faces of the people in the restaurant. His breathing grew unsteady, his mind racing. Put the weapon down, Trump said gently. Let's figure this out together. You're not alone in this." For a long moment, there was silence. Then, slowly, Eric's fingers loosened. His arm lowered, and finally, with a deep, shuddering breath, he placed the weapon on the counter. A collective sigh of relief swept through the restaurant. Jake quickly stepped forward and slid the weapon out of reach. The danger had passed, but the weight of the moment still hung in the air. Eric looked up at Trump, his eyes filled with uncertainty. "What now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Trump gave him a reassuring nod. "Now? Now we fix this." The sound of distant sirens grew louder, signaling the arrival of the police. A few moments later, officers entered the restaurant, their hands hovering near their holsters as they scanned the tense scene. They spotted Eric, now standing with slumped shoulders, his eyes filled with regret. Before they could act, Trump stepped forward, raising a hand. "Take it easy on him," he said firmly. "He's not a criminal. He's just a kid who made a mistake." The officers exchanged glances, assessing the situation. Seeing the weapon already secured and Eric no longer a threat, they nodded and approached him with care. As they gently placed the cuffs around Eric's wrists, he didn't resist. He looked at Trump, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry." Trump gave him a nod. "You took responsibility. That's what matters. This isn't the end for you." Meanwhile, across the room, Naomi and Clara stood facing each other. The confrontation from earlier still lingered in the air, but something had changed. Naomi's gaze was strong yet understanding. Clara hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I was wrong," she admitted, her voice quieter, more sincere this time. "I shouldn't have said what I did." Naomi studied her for a moment, then extended her hand. "Let's try to do better." A brief pause, then Clara reached out and shook Naomi's hand. The room, once filled with hostility and fear, now felt lighter, a quiet sense of relief settling over everyone. As the officers led Eric outside, customers whispered among themselves, reflecting on what they had just witnessed. In a single afternoon, they had seen division, desperation, and fear, but also compassion, understanding, and second chances. Trump turned to the crowd, his voice steady. "This is what happens when we don't look out for each other. We need to be better, not just as individuals, but as a community." The words hung in the air, resonating with everyone in the room. Change wouldn't happen overnight, but in that moment, a lesson had been learned. And for the first time that day, McDonald's felt like more than just a restaurant. It felt like a place where people truly saw one another. As the commotion settled and the last of the police cars pulled away, Trump remained seated, scrolling through his phone. While the restaurant returned to normal, he quietly made a call. With a few short words to a contact, he arranged for Eric's mother's medical bills to be covered, without fanfare, without seeking attention. It was a gesture Eric would only learn about later, but one that would change his life forever. Across the room, Naomi and Clara sat together, an unlikely pair sharing a tray of fries. What had started as hostility had transformed into something unexpected. A conversation, an understanding. "I think I've spent too much time assuming the worst in people," Clara admitted, stirring her drink absent-mindedly. Naomi smiled. "We all have. But what matters is what we do next." Clara nodded, a genuine look of reflection on her face. They weren't just moving past their argument, they were building something new. A friendship neither of them had expected. As the evening light filtered through the windows, the restaurant felt different. Not just because of what had happened, but because of what it meant. The people inside had witnessed fear, anger, and division, but they had also seen the power of compassion, understanding, and second chances. Trump stood, adjusting his coat. As he headed for the door, A few customers stopped to thank him. He waved them off with a small smile. I just did what anyone should do. And with that, he walked out, leaving behind a McDonald's that wasn't just a place to grab a meal that day. It had become a reminder that even in the most unexpected moments, kindness and unity can bring people together. What do you think about this incredible story? Let us know in the comments. Was there a moment that stood out to you the most? We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It really helps support the channel and brings more inspiring stories your way. At the end of the day, no matter our differences, understanding and kindness can change lives. A small act of compassion, a moment of courage, or even just listening to someone's story can make a world of difference. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.